Are you ready to learn everything there is to know about what is mixed voice? You know, I have to confess, I also want to know what mixed voice is. But before you go looking for the answer somewhere else, let me explain some things. I have lots of information for you. I studied singing for a really long time, and I don't know how in all of those years I managed to escape this elusive mixed voice, but I definitely hear about it all the time. And what's weird is that nobody seems to have a uniform idea of what it is. I'm going to tell you what I've learned and why it's so confusing, why it's not clear what it is, what is actually more important for you to know, and then I'll give you some extra tips. So, are you ready? Let's dig in. The two most common answers I hear about what mixed voice is are as follows. The first one, it's an answer I can get behind. The second one, we'll get to it. So the first one, in your classical singing voice, there are two resonances. We've talked about this before. You have a chest voice and you have a head voice. Unlike contemporary singing, classical singing has two resonances, which we've talked about. There's the chest voice and there's the head voice. And those terms describe where the sound vibrates in your body. Contemporary techniques do not have that. But what's interesting is that even though there are two different places where the sound can resonate in your classical technique, there's also a place where they overlap, meaning you can choose whether to sing the pitches in a chest voice or in a head voice, because there's a certain part of your range where both are possible options for you. So some people call that region of your classical technique range your mixed voice, even though there's no mixing happening. So that's what it is called sometimes. The answer that I think is straight out of Neverland, of the land of fairies and unicorns, where there's some kind of ability to mix a little bit of your chest voice with a little bit of your head voice. So let's talk about why that is completely insane. The number one reason it's completely insane is that it's completely impossible. Why is it impossible? Well, I like to think about the bike that I had when I was a little kid. It was a 10-speed bike, and it has the little curly handles like a bighorn sheep. And then it has this little dial on it that has 10 speeds, and you can adjust whatever speed you want what gear you want your bike to be in. Now, there were times when I was, riding my bike, and of course, I don't know what any of them do anyway, but I was curious and had to play with all of them, where I would get stuck kind of between two of them. And when that happened, my pedals wouldn't move and the bike would kind of swerve because it didn't know what to do. It couldn't operate, right? It was kind of in this standstill mode until I allowed it to pick one gear or the other. I don't know how to drive stick shift, but I know it's the same thing on a car, where you can't be in two gears at the same time or the car goes into neutral, right? So it doesn't really do anything. The same is true for your voice, your classical singing voice. If you think about your chest voice and your head voice being two gears of your voice, you have to pick one or the other. You can't be in them both at the same time. It's just like I can't be in my office and the bathroom at the same time. There's only one of me, and those are two separate rooms. I can't be in both of them at the same time. It's the same thing. Your head voice is like one room. There's one room of your body that the chest voice lives in, and there's one room of your body that the head voice lives in. And you can't be in both of them at the same time. You can't use I can't be in a little bit of the office and a little bit of the bathroom at the same time unless I have really long legs and I can stretch and have a little toe. It just doesn't work like that, right? It's the same with your voice. You cannot be in those two places at the same time. So that's why that definition of mixed voice is completely bananas. I think the way that number two came to be, I don't know who started that one, but I think it's probably a misinterpretation of definition number one. So remember I said number one is where that classical voice, there's an overlap where you can choose whether to sing in the head voice or whether to sing in the chest voice. So for example, if we go on the piano In the female range, it's going to be anything from the A above middle C on down. Anything from there down, you can choose. So like, let's say I pick this E above middle C. I can choose whether to be in a chest voice or in a head voice. Right? I can choose one or the other in that place in my range. There's no mixing, there's no combining, there's no anything. It's just an overlap of two parts of your voice where you can decide whether you want to be in that one or the other one. So I think that someone misunderstood that and came up with the other definition where you're combining a little bit of one or the other, when it's not that at all. It's that you get to choose one or the other. And I think that number 2 came from someone misunderstanding what number 1 is. Just to keep it in the land of confusion, once we switch over into contemporary singing, you have 2 techniques, which are belt and mix. So, for whatever reason, the contemporary technique of mix is also similar in name to this mixed voice, right? So the mix technique has absolutely nothing to do with this elusive mixed voice. The mix technique is a way to sing in a contemporary resonance. We've said this in other videos that I'll share with you, that in order to create a classical either chest voice or head voice, you have to lift the soft palate in the back like a yawn. Right? So you can either be or right? So belt is one of the contemporary techniques, and it is singing in your calling voice. It often gets confused with the chest voice because the chest voice is big and booming and loud, and so is belt. But chest has this big raised soft palate, and belt does not. Belt is singing in your calling voice. So it's basically your speaking voice, only louder, set to pitch, right? Your mixed voice, the mixed technique, is also not a raised soft palate, just like your belt, but it doesn't have the same effort. It's not calling, it's not loud and big and booming, it's softer. So if I were, like right now I'm speaking in a belt, it's brassier, it's bigger and fuller. I can also choose to sing in a mix, and do you hear how it's much softer and lighter, has very, I don't know, it's just smooth and soft. This is mix, so that is the mix technique. Also very often confused with the classical head voice, but not the same thing at all. Mixed voice, this crazy thing, is often confused with the mixed technique, which is totally different. Mixed technique is also often confused with the head voice. Totally different. Also, mixed technique is often confused with belt technique. And I just gave you an example with my speaking of the difference, but I'll do the same thing with singing. So I showed you on this pitch how you could sing in a chest voice or a head voice. I'm also going to do that with the belt and mix. So here's chest voice again. Head voice. And here's belt. Hey! And here's mix. Hey! Right? Do you hear that difference? That's all 4 of them on the same pitch, right? So belt and mix, because they both resonate here, oftentimes are confused for each other. Belt is just bigger, brassier, louder, and requires more effort. Mix is softer, lighter, way more flexible. You can do a lot more with it. You can make it sound a lot of different ways, but they are both here. I hope that clears up some of this mess. But if you want more information, I have a few places I'd love to direct you, the links of which are all in the description below. If you want to learn more about how to mix properly, how to belt properly, I have several videos here on YouTube, as well as on my TikTok channel, which is at Katti Power. You can see how I spell my name, that you can check out for all kinds of information about that. Or I also have this amazing program that I would highly recommend that you check out called No Limits Academy. There's information about it in the description. If you would like to get some coaching, I highly recommend No Limits Academy. If you want to try it out before you buy, I have a 7-day trial membership to No Limits Academy, which gives you access to a whole bunch of video courses that are samples of the kind of work we do in the Academy, and then you get the opportunity to come live to one of our end of the month master classes online, where you get to bring whatever it is you're working on, whatever questions you have, to the class, and you get one-on-one time with me to get feedback on whatever that is. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. If that interests you alone, the masterclass, I have something that is just the masterclass by itself. Every single month I have something called the Second Saturday Masterclass. It's a spot for 20 people every month to come and get their questions answered, get feedback on whatever they're working on in their singing. And there's information and a link for that below, so you can check that out. You can participate in it every month that there's a slot available for you. So I hope that is helpful. If you know some answers about what this crazy mixed voice is, let me know. I'm so curious. I'm always interested to know more about what other people think that is.